Well, hello everybody. Thank you very much for having me here. I'm very grateful to have this opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Walter Yamazaki. I've been a guest speaker, but I've also been a student for Happy Science. I've encountered the teachings back in 1989, and then became a disciple in 1992. So it's been a while, maybe 31 years. Back then, there were only 10 books published in English. And I was very, because of the depth and breadth of the teachings, I wanted to really dig deep and learn from the source, which is in Japanese. And so I'm not the author of the 3,000 plus books that our teacher, Master Ryuho Okawa, has published. But I'm a fan of it. And I want to sort of teach this, what I've learned, and on a very fundamental, maybe basic level of how we discover happiness in the current life that we are living and how we interpret it. And I'm sure like in this New Living Expo, everybody understands that we are all spiritual beings, right? And we all reincarnate and everything. So I prepared this more for the beginners. So hopefully it's not too novice level, but I'd like to maybe hopefully, provide you more of like maybe a different alternate perspective, or maybe something new. And so let's get started. So our journey to happiness, it's definitely a winding road. Why are we here in this world, right? What is happiness? And I'd like you to think about this for a moment. And it's a simple question, but it's very difficult to summarize, I think. In a short sentence, does anyone know who'd like to share why we're here in this world? One phrase, sentence. I hear laughter. Maybe because it could be a long answer potentially. It is quite difficult to summarize. But regardless of who you are, where we come from, what kind of nationality, right? It's happiness that we all seek in this lifetime. Happiness. And what is that, right? We want to achieve something, perhaps. We want to overcome something. We may want to find peace in the turmoil that we might be in. Or it could be finding some kind of relevance in this lifetime, right? To find sort of meaning. Or it could be why we are dealing with all sorts of stuff that we may not like to deal with in this lifetime. We all have responsibilities in life. We have bills to pay, we have certain responsibilities, we have kids to look after, all sorts of stuff. But amongst all that, what does this all mean? Why is it so important? And so I'm sure everyone questioned this at some point. And if not have done so already, I've already raised this question, so if you already thought about this 1 minute ago. So happiness that what we are trying to achieve is really happiness that transcends this physical world to the spiritual world. Now, a lot of the happiness theories that we are all familiar in this world right now is really focused on this physical world, right? It's more about finding financial independence, or it could be about how do we solve, issues in relationships? How do we find love, right? How do we succeed in a business? How do we navigate through these challenges in the financial, challenges that we are currently going in right now? And so most of the theories are really based on this world, but very little on the spirit world. How our current spiritual awareness or level or state that we are in right now, how can we navigate that in this physical world, right? And how can we carry that into the next world? Now, to put in life in perspective, we only have 20,000 to 30,000 days in this lifetime to live. It may feel like 100,000, right, or 200,000, but it's actually only 20,000 to 30,000 years. That's about roughly, mid-50s to maybe around 83 or so. If you're lucky, maybe even more. But if you really think from that perspective, it's very limited time since we are born to that moment when we choose to leave this world, or when we have to leave this world. So every day is like a sand in an hourglass. And so how we live our life in this world and how we spend it is so important. So I'm creating this very, simple, very oversimplified illustration. But I have this categorized as the unaware, right? The physical world, we think that we're happy. We think that we're so successful and great, right? And once we leave this world, we end up in some place that we did not expect. We end up finding that, all the stuff and value that we've chased in this lifetime had no value or meaning when we end up in the spirit world. And there's another one that our teacher had described is that the miserable is that we complain a lot, right? In this life, everything's, we're unhappy, nothing's going well, we're always speaking about negativity, and we end up in the world where, who we are in here. And there's also the kind of hero that really thinks a lot about other people, right? They're constantly living in service in other people, but eating basically, disregarding their own stability, their life. I know there might be some people that you can think of people who are constantly thinking about others, but then end up in a very harsh life in this world. But they end up as a great person in the spiritual world. It's a kind of person that we deeply respect, right? But our goal here is about how do we find happiness in this physical world with spiritual fulfillment? And then, of course, because we have achieved that in here, that is the exact same world where we're going to go in the other world. What's key here is that how we live our life, right? How we maintain this vibration in our mind that will help us lead to the world where that vibration is met, so to speak. So heaven and hell, like in traditional religions, we teach that, what you do and what you don't do, right or wrong. And then if you do this, you go to hell. If you don't, blah, blah, blah. But actually that heaven and hell exists right here, right now, depending on what we're thinking, where our mind is connected to, right? 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And so in that perspective, we have to think about, we come to this moment where this idea of responsibility, taking responsibility of our mind, and how do we navigate that in this challenging times? So let's try to define happiness. This might be really, really basic for this audience, but just for the sake of it, I wanted to maybe show you. Defining happiness. We can find happiness in security and control, right? Or in peace. We can find happiness in health. It could be being loved, right? I'm just throwing this out there. It may not apply to everybody here. It could be about the feeling of being valued, right? It could also be being relevant, being respected. It could be having a purpose or spending valuable time in something that is important. Self-improvement, aspirations, right? If we have that could be a definition of happiness. Seeing results from our efforts, right? We work so hard towards something, and then finally we're able to achieve it. Making a difference, or doing what matters. Being heard, right? Watching our children grow, for some people. Seeing others genuinely happy. I've received this, from a few people. And then your answer here, fill in the blank, whatever it may be. So I'd like to think about this for a moment. What is the value? Where is your happiness based on? What is your happiness based on? And you can list that out on a piece of paper. What is really important to you? And then we can go to what threatens that happiness. And it could be the opposite of what I've listed. I'm just going to go through quickly. Insecurities, illness, a loss, being undervalued, irrelevance. That's a big one, right? Disrespect, loss of purpose, no progress, no hope, no sense of peace. Worries, anxieties. I think that we can all relate to that. Not making a difference, not mattering, being hurt or slander. Comparison with others. That could also be something. And then blank space there. Anything that you like to put in. But all these, if you really look at it, as you, I'm sure at one point you've learned from Shakyamuni Buddha's teachings, that worldly life is suffering, he said. in a different way to interpret it, because English language is so difficult. Worldly life is another way to interpret it, is worldly life does not satisfy. Meaning that if our happiness is based in this world, right, that are transient, on transient things, it is easily taken away from you. It is suffering. Like, for example, youth, right? I'm reaching my 50s. I let you know my age. But, as I'm a teenager, I think I'm going to live for, forever. And, but then as we get older, we begin to, for me anyway, feel a lot of limitations in my physical ability, and endurance. And so, and this also applies to a lot of things. For example, like happiness that is dependent on how people think of us, for example, right? What people think of you or me, we have absolutely no control over. But there are people who depend our happiness on the evaluation from others, right? I think there's some nods in that. And I have gone through that stage as well. I may still be going through that. But when we don't receive what we expect, then we suffer. So this is a lot of the things that really concurs to the idea of impermanence, right? I think we all, yes, go ahead.
Walter, I love what you're saying.
Yeah.
Here's the thought.
Yes.
I don't know whether or not this enhances me, is that I think about the spirit
yes.
world.
Yes.
Put us on earth to experience earthly joy,
yes.
happiness,
yes.
unhappiness. I don't know how you want to take this, but
yes.
even the things that you said there that are not happy, we're put here to experience it as human beings.
Exactly.
And if when we transfer to a better world, we'll be wiser when we get there that we have that experience.
Yes.
So I love what you're saying.
Yes.
You take it, I think, to the spiritual level.
Yes.
Of that, why we were even put here.
Yes.
And what we're going to experience, what He wants us to experience.
So you're 10 slides ahead of me. As I said, this is prepared. Imagine. No. But you're right. You answered my question, why we are here. And that is exactly it. That we are in this world to undergo soul training. Now, as I said, I do apologize because these slides are really made for people who may not be as advanced as you are here in this audience. But that's exactly it. And in this idea of impermanence, right? Everything in this world is not permanent, basically. It's like the flow of time. And so as we understand that this world, nothing is, we're trying to find the permanent in the impermanent, right? We're trying to find the truth in something that's constantly moving through time. And so what that is really teaching us, while we are in this physical world, teaching us that to help us find what is truth in life. What is the light that we are looking for? What is the eternal in the finite?
We won't all find that. Because some of us die before you get there.
Yes.
We're here for a reason.
Yes.
And
yes.
even if we die before we get to some of those truths,
yes.
what you're saying up there is the experience of life.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. So I might have to skip a few slides here. Because I feel like I'm talking to a lot of like master classes and I'm teaching to a sophomore, level. But, so finding the permanence in the world of impermanence, right? And so this is what we are trying to find as diamond in the rough. In Buddhism, we call it Buddha nature. In other religions, we call it child of God, right? Whatever term that we use, we have a diamond in the rough. And it is up to us and our responsibility. We bring it into this world to refine that. A lot of the resistance that we encounter, a lot of the hardships that we encounter, a lot of the difficulties that we encounter with people and things and experiences, that in itself may be uncomfortable, but it's really like grinding that gemstone, right? To polish it into the most beautiful thing possible. And that experience can only be experienced while we are here. And I can see that we're all understanding that part too already. So let's give it a simple example here. I like to give this, I have a lot of structural engineers as friends. And we all know about the Millennium Tower, right? In San Francisco. It's a very expensive mistake that they made. So what this is, it's funny because it's not funny, but it's interesting because it's a symbol of the new San Francisco wealth, they say, right? It's this towering skyscraper. But then the problem is that it is sinking, it's tilting, 2 feet of tilt. And the cost of retrofitting that is going to be $100 million. Some of it is going to be part of our tax dollars. And this is quite serious. And the problem is that the foundation here is that they put a pile of what they call friction piles. And it seems to be it's a common thing in buildings of San Francisco. They put a bunch of them, and that should be able to maintain the upright position. But because this building is so tall and heavy, and because of the composition of the dirt underneath that building, it began to tilt. And a lot of cracks in the windows. It's crazy. And so, it says, basically it said it took a shortcut, I guess, an afterthought. And so if we apply this to life, right? The idiom, the castle built on sand. If happiness is dependent upon if happiness is based on the foundation of this worldly life only, then it's going to be a really tough process. And I think what is so important is, sorry, what was your name? Cliff. What this gentleman, Cliff, has mentioned, and I think we can all agree, is that life values based on spiritual foundation is the key and the most important thing that we can possibly have in order to have a stable, peaceful, happier life. And that sort of values is what is missing in America, I believe, right now. There's so much of this glitzy glamour on the surface, in your face stuff. But then in the end, when we're left with nothing, what is left, right? And so this is why the foundation is so important. We all know this image of the iceberg, right? 89% of it is submerged underwater. The bulk of its weight, is what keeps that iceberg solid and stable. And what we can only see is what is above the water. We can rarely see what's underneath unless we send divers and cameras under there. But so if we used to use this analogy, who we think we are, which is above the water, this world, versus who we are, is quite different, right? So when I ask you who you are, right? Who are you? Or if you ask me who I am, immediately, I guess our natural instinct is to say, hi, I'm Walter Yamazaki. I am a Japanese Canadian. I was born in Canada. I was raised there and then I went to university, blah, blah, went to Japan, renounced this world, trained for a few years and then came back out here. Blah, 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 all these credentials, maybe awards or recognitions, whatever that. We try so hard to kind of put that and just say, hey, this is me. But once all that is gone, which is possible in this world, right? Reputations crumble, right? Your titles can change as soon as we change jobs or positions. As we grow older, right? I'm no longer the young 17-year-old, right? Things are constantly changing. And versus who we are in here. And if we stop to think, how much time do we spend in our 24 hours time focusing on who we are in here? To really take that, say, even 10 minutes of quiet time, to really dig deep and think, okay, what are the issues that are going on here? What conflicts do I have? Am I at peace? Are the happiness that I am aiming for, is that misunderstood? Have I misunderstood anyone, in this interaction with other people? What sort of mistakes or what sort of words have I uttered that may have hurt the other person by accident? How can I change that? All those things, yeah? So this is where the focus is going, where in Japanese, we call it kokoro, right? It's very difficult. Again, English is a very difficult language to translate. Kokoro means it's a combination of heart, mind, and soul. When we say mind, automatically, for some reason, in the Western world, we think of the brain, right? But mind is like all here, down here, up here. It's a combination of all of that. And so when we really focus on the mind, it influences the way, it influences the way we interact with each other, right? How we carry our mind it influences the words we choose to speak. It influences how we interact with others. It influences how we live. It influences how we make choices in life. And this is, as Mr. Cliff has said, there is a lot of pain and suffering that we may look at this life as a duality of good and evil, right? Light and darkness, good and bad, happiness and misery. But a path to polish our mind and find happiness in the process of discovering who we are. This is what we are here for. And so this is why this is so important, to understand who we are here, the heart and mind. So life is like a white water rafting, right? You have to go down this wild river and it's crazy. But how can we navigate through those, torrentious, path in the river in order to make it to the other side? And this is, again, what's important. So again, the question, who are you? How do you describe who you are? And there's a famous saying, what you think is who you are, right? So what we are thinking every day, it could be anything. If we have a personal recorder of what we uttered, not only just words, but in our minds, just imagine, our master teacher, Yuho Okawa, he says that there's like this thought tape that is running constantly in our mind. So great, loving, selfless or altruistic thoughts is recorded in gold lettering, right? And then when we are miserable, angry, upset, selfish, all that stuff, it gets recorded in some strange color. And so the recording of that lifetime is pretty much the grand total, right? Which would determine for yourself where you go in the afterlife. But this is really about who we are. So we usually identify ourselves as these, our names and whatnot, where we're from. But once we begin to really focus on the mind, your nationality, skin color, race, what kind of accent we have or how we look or where, all of that on the surface, it won't matter at all. And if you really think about this idea of reincarnation or identify every single person on this planet as a spiritual being, then the problems of racism, problems of these national, say historical national fights, between two countries, all that wouldn't make sense. What if, say in a historical context, like one country who attacked another country, in the next lifetime, your nationality was reversed, right? And in a way that though that system exists in order for us to learn something. So this you already know, spiritual beings, right? And then reincarnation. So we talked about this again. So, understanding the basis of human rights, right? Why human life is sacred and why freedom is sacred, right? Because we are all fragments of God. We're all fragments of light. And this is why that life, the value of life cannot be quantified. When someone says, if you are to trade 100 human lives for one human life, which will you choose? And the reason why the debate is so difficult is because we cannot quantify the value of life, right? And so this is why in the idea of the equality of human rights, why we are all equal, why we are all valuable, in the sense that we are all spiritual beings. And this is something that I thought would be important to discuss. So in this way, fairness and equality, right? Through reincarnation. It's another perspective on happiness. A lot of us, there's a lot of talk about, what's fair in this life and what's not fair, right? What's not equal. But that is, in my perspective, that we are only looking at life from a limited point of view of this finite time, in say 50 years lifetime. If we are, souls who are reincarnated over and over again and accumulate this karma, right? And that was what, Gentleman Cliff has said, that we are here to learn something, to discover something in this process. Then then in the idea of cause and effect, right? That everything is fair. What we experience in life that may not be fair may have been the result of what was in the past, right? And so forth. So the point that we are eternally evolving to strengthen that light that we have within our mind is ultimately we are trying to expand this capacity to love others. In difficult situation, in somewhat unfair situation, from the viewpoint, limited viewpoint of this world, it may seem unfair, right? It may seem atrocious. But from the span of eternity, it would make sense that we are there for the purpose of our soul training. We are there to understand love. We are there to really deepen our understanding and feeling and perspective that we are here to really expand and improve our understanding of each other. Here, maybe this might be a personal question. Raise your hand if you know of a relative, someone that's close, who has often given you a hard time. Yeah? Even my daughter has raised that hand. But see, it goes to show, there will always be, if not a relative, somebody at work, right? Your boss, colleagues, or it could be anywhere that you have a close relationship with. There's always that somebody that we encounter. And so that is, again, a way where we are learning something that's valuable. And if we look from the perspective of reincarnation, then that, in terms of learning and growth, things begin to make sense. So in this pamphlet, this is what I've encountered a long time ago when I was struggling with racism, bullying school, well, actually in high school. I have to admit, I have thought about suicide. And it's such a grave situation where a lot of kids these days in America are taking their life every day. A year, I think, is more than, 30,000, 40,000? It's an atrocious number. It's unreal. And during the pandemic, it was even more than that. And that is because people, I can kind of relate. Maybe, everyone's problems are different. They're unique. But the understanding that we are here and suffering in order for us to learn something, that has completely changed the trajectory of my life. And I wanted to introduce you to our master teacher Okawa's lecture. It was given in Japan back in 1992, a long time ago. Unfortunately, it's subtitled. It's not voiceover, but perhaps you can hear his voice. And he's speaking to a crowd of 50,000 people. But the subtitle is a little bit fuzzy because it's recorded in standard definition way back in the days. But I'd like to share with you of what he says about reincarnation. It's very basic, but again, maybe something you can take with you. So about 1 minute and 18 seconds.
その過去の転生を繰り返してやっている中に、魂には一定の傾向性というのが出てきます。それは職業の中に出てくることが多いわけですけれども、何度もやっているうちに、その人の魂にとって長所とも言うべき特徴と短所とも言うべき欠点、そういうものがはっきりと出てきます。そしてその生まれ変わりのシステムをつぶさに研究いたしますと、どうやら人間はこの世に生まれ変わってくるときに、生まれ変わってくる前に、今世の魂の修行の課題とも言うべきものを明確に決めてきているらしいということが分かってきました。過去何回かの地上経験を経て、その方が卒業できなかったこと、人生として人間として生きてきたときに、そのままでは合格ではなかったと言われるところを、もう一度同じような環境において試されることあり、全く逆の環境において試されることありです。
Right. Is that amazing? I think it's amazing. I don't know. What do you think? Yes.
One thing that hasn't been said yet that I dealt with at an early age is being honest with myself. What I've found in life, and I think we've all done this, that we have reacted and done something that later on we think, I shouldn't have done that. And I found out earlier on in my life, I should ask myself, who is the most honest person you have ever met? And the answer has to be me.
Yeah.
Because I know why I do things and why I don't do things. I know whether I like somebody or don't like somebody. I know why I like them or don't like them. And if I can answer all those questions, and if I can answer, will I go to heaven? And if I can honestly say, I will, I think I've been successful here on earth.
Yeah.
Because that's why I was put here.
Yes.
And if God wants us to really understand why we are here and what we are doing here, if we can answer it honestly, it's to enjoy it, it's to see what he or she has put in front of us to enjoy, and who we have in front of us to enjoy. And saying it honestly, I think we're going to be good. I think you're successful. Whether or not it's in career, or whether it's having children, or whether it's dealing with somebody that we wonder whether we love them.
Yes.
And do we love ourselves?
Yes.
Honestly.
And that is an important point, very important point. Being authentic with yourself. There's a lot of people in this world who cannot do that. Cliff, I think you're ahead of a lot of people because because that's another thing where we have to be, truly honest, right? Be authentic. And that is the important part of self-reflection, which is part of our, there are 4 principles of happiness, which I can tell you right now, which is love, right? The idea of love. Second is wisdom, spiritual wisdom. And then the third one is self-reflection, being able to really understand who you are.
And that's part of honesty.
Yes. And fourth,
Self-reflect, being honest with yourself.
exactly.
Who really am I?
And the fourth pillar is progress, which is, we progress as a soul, right? And that's a cycle of 4. So in a way, like inclination of the soul, being honest with yourself is so important. The inclination is really over lifetimes of like what we've experienced over lifetimes and lifetimes. We begin to develop some sort of inclination, right? And what that inclination is almost like habits, or it could be like some sort of like it could be a misalignment if you put it in a negative light, a misalignment in a car. If you let it go, at a certain point, you will crash, right? Life is a winding road. We're going to have to be flexible and change the course. But when we do crash, that's when we become introspective and we have to be honest with ourselves. Why did this happen? Was I too egocentric, right? Was I being too stubborn? Or was I not listening to the other person, right? So a lot of things that we can really dig deep and think. And this one thing, I love this book. It's called The True Eightfold Path. And this is a practical guide that will allow us to help us guide through this self-reflection. I can recommend this to you. It's on Amazon as well. I'm not sure if we have more books at our booth 13. But Master says here at chapter 2, Right View, he says, the images of yourself and of others are like mirrors that reflect each other. So when we encounter someone who is extremely difficult, right, or challenging, or you just cannot understand why, instead of pointing the finger, and you look at the 3 fingers pointing back at you, right, as well, try to think of what is it that he or she is trying to teach me? What am I supposed to learn here, right? And just like how our face is built, we have 2 eyes, 2 ears, but 1 mouth. Speak once, but then listen and look twice as much, right? And so basically talk less, listen and observe and hear more, right? Learn as much as you can from your environment. Another one is those who really do not know themselves cannot know others, right? And this is why, like Cliff said, we have to be really honest with ourselves. When we are able to become naked with ourselves, right? All the ugly things that you may not want to see is actually something that we need to face. And that does not define who you are, right? Those ugly things are temporary. They do not define who you are because we know that deep inside of all of that stuff is a diamond in the rough. And so that process of refining that through these stages of Eightfold Path is what allows us to find the real gem that we are supposed to discover in this lifetime. And that's why we have all this variety of characters, right, in this world. Why do they exist? And so that is what's important. So this is who we are, right? And in the same lecture, master teacher said, we may be born a king one time and as a beggar at another time. However, no matter what circumstances we may live in, we should never forget that every situation is prepared for soul's training. Right? So again, when we come back to this idea of what is fair, right? Someone who is wealthy versus when we are born in a very challenging kind of family versus someone who is born with a harmonious, environment versus something else that's challenging. We all have those differences. But once we start comparing our life with others, there's no end. There's no end. What we are given in this lifetime, thank you, what we are given in this lifetime is perfectly designed for your own unique life. And so the question is, what are we going to do about it, right? What are we going to do about it? Because in every single person's life, they may give you a hard time, whatever, but it's really up to us and how we drive that, how we receive those words, how we receive the information that's around us, and how do we utilize that to turn that into a pearl, right? You know how pearl is made? They throw like a stone or a pebble in there, it suffers a lot and starts to, embrace it all, right? And it turns into a beautiful pearl. And that is really the process of what we're going through in life. So this is why spiritual view of life as a foundation is so important. In one of our books here, The Brilliance of the Soul, he says, and virtue are born as you struggle and overcome the appropriate challenges of life that are specifically designed to, sorry, I didn't read that right. The brilliance of the soul and virtue are born as you struggle and overcome the appropriate challenges of life that are specifically designed for you. I think it was written as a poem. That's probably why. So, specifically designed for you. What is that? What kind of life were you given? That is your mission, right? If the issues and challenges in life is so big, that means you are just as great, right? You are just as great. Because I'm running out of time, I have to skip this, unfortunately. I'm sorry. So what Master Teacher has told us is that, he said, with wisdom from a spiritual perspective, you can not only achieve true happiness and prosperity for your life, but also learn to create harmony among people with different values to create an exceptional society. And in order to do that, there's two vectors, supposedly opposing, conflicting vectors. One is harmony, right, that goes across, and then one is progress and prosperity. So it looks like a cross. And there may be two different opposing vectors, but it is up to us to how do we harmonize that. When there's too much progress, there's a lot of problems or issues when running into other people, isn't it? When you're the only person succeeding in a company, you start climbing to the top and disregard other people, then you begin to run into issues. And then we have to focus on harmonizing. Have we not forgotten about gratitude? Have we not forgotten about other people who have supported you to get to where we are, right? And so here he also says that regardless of your environment, govern the kingdom within, right? Govern the kingdom within. In other words, he said, do not let your mind master you. Yeah, you be the master of your own mind. The mind is like a wild horse, as what we're taught. If you don't train it, it's wild. You cannot control it. You fly into anger and rage, right? Get upset. Or then you start saying words you don't mean and then regret later, right? Or we do things that we regret later. But once we start training our mind, we're able to use that to our advantage. It has great power, just like the iceberg. There's so much power within it. There's so much stuff I want to tell you about this part. But in 45 minutes, I cannot cover that. But I promise you, there is so much to offer here. And just a short story of mine. I'm not sponsoring this, by the way, but I ran the Spartan race last year. It was at San Luis Obispo. And it was the hardest race ever. You know, this basically challenges your mental and physical capacity. But what I learned from here is that even though like I didn't finish, you know, in such a great spot, it was like 60th percentile in my age group. But what matters is I finished it, right? I survived it. It was supposed to be 14 miles and it ended up to be 16, 17 miles, 16 miles. It was hard, but to me, it's a symbolism of life. We are running a race against ourselves. It can get really hard, right? And what matters is, is to not to complain, but to really see what it is that God or Buddha or the universe is trying to teach us to improve ourselves. What is that golden thread? What is that jewel that we are destined to find? And so life is an accumulation of inches, really, every single day. 2 minutes? Okay. Oh, 4 minutes. Okay. So when you see it in that perspective, everyone is undergoing soul training, right? In their unique soul training, just as you are. So in the level that is appropriate for each and every person. So there's no need to compare yourself with others. It's really about the question of you. And then looking at others and learning from them. It's like, wow, that person must be going, oh, it's like, I feel for them, man. But, you know, they're really trying hard. It's like, so is there anything that I can do? And you encourage each other, right? Even though there's differences, you don't need to one-up each other. Oh, you know, my problems are much worse than yours. You know, you don't want to do that. You know, it's not about comparison. It's about how we are overcoming it. It's not about what we do. It's how we do it, right? You are not identified by what you do as a career person, but how you are doing it. So all that title doesn't matter, right? So in the end, I want to wrap this up. Is that in here, Master Teacher Jiho Okawa says there are two purposes in life in this world. He summarizes it in a different perspective. One is that life is a journey of looking inside ourselves, a journey of self-discovery. That could be synonymous to enlightenment. Second one is through our experiences related to others, we learn about our own selves as well as how important it is we influence one another as we live together. Isn't it wonderful? So when we really look at life in this perspective, it's crazy beautiful. This world was created with great intentions, good intentions. And then I'm sure that the universe wants all of us to prosper, be happy, find that happiness. And it's really up to us. If we are given free will, then it is our responsibility to be able to navigate that in the best way possible. And this is the art of living, right? Make it beautiful. Make your life beautiful. Make your life beautiful. And then that's how we are able to prosper. And as students or as disciples, this is what we do. We are exploring the right mind. What is rightness? It's not what we typically understand as right and wrong, you know, black and white. If you follow the scripture, it's all right and whatever, then you're all damned to hell. You know, it's not exactly that. But it's almost like why we call happy science is because science in Japanese is more like this scientific inquiry into what is right. And that takes a lot of thought and practice and testing and see where our mind is attuned. And then we use the teachings of the guide to help lead us to the right direction. And so that's what we do as a member of Happy Science. You know, we are basically seekers of happiness, seekers of light. How do we increase the light within to improve ourselves? So next week, as a follow-up, we're providing this called Happiness, Karma, and Reincarnation. And if you have not received a flyer, we have some that you can take home with you. Contact us, or you know, our temple is out there in Redwood City. It's kind of a far drive from here, but please do join us. If you have any questions, please visit our booth at booth 13. I'll be available as well. No, not the bookstore. No, but it's all available on number 13. Yes.
There's a lot of matches here.
Yeah. All right. I know I'm out of time, so we'll leave questions outside, but thank you so much for spending the time with me. And yeah, thank you.